When you think of color, what comes to mind? The vibrant hues of a sunset, the deep blues of the ocean, or the endless shades of green in a forest, right? But today, we're not just going to talk about the colors you already know. We're diving into some facts that will change the way you see the world around you. First stop, the origin of red. Red is one of the oldest colors used by humans. And it's not just a color, it's a symbol. Did you know that ancient humans created the first red pigments from iron oxide found in clay and rocks? That's right. Red ochre was used in cave paintings as far back as 40,000 years ago. But did you know that carmine red, used in ancient cosmetics, actually comes from cochineal insects? These tiny insects, found on cactus plants, were harvested, dried, and crushed to extract the red pigment. The use of cochineal dates back to the Aztecs and Mayans, who prized the color for its intensity. In fact, it was so valuable that it became one of the most important trade items in the colonial era. In fact, early civilizations used red for everything, from royal attire to war paint. Next, let's talk about blue, one of the most fascinating colors in history. Blue wasn't always available to ancient cultures. The Egyptians were the first to develop a synthetic blue pigment, known as Egyptian blue, created around 2500 BCE. It was made from a mix of sand, copper, and natron, a type of salt, then heated to create a vibrant blue hue. Before that, people could only get blue from rare gemstones like Lapis Lazuli, which were worth more than gold. So blue was reserved for the most precious things, pharaohs and gods. But here's the cool part. It wasn't just for decoration. It was believed to have magical properties. It was thought to protect against evil spirits and bring good fortune. Now, let's zoom in on purple. You've probably heard that purple was the color of royalty. But did you know how it got that reputation? The secret lies in a tiny sea snail found along the Mediterranean coast. These snails produce a mucus that, when exposed to sunlight, turns a rich purple. It took thousands of snails to create just a small amount of dye. This made purple incredibly expensive, and it became the color of choice for Roman emperors and other nobility. And then there's yellow, the color of happiness, sunshine, and warmth. But in ancient China, yellow had a deeper meaning. It was the color of the emperor, the symbol of imperial power. Yellow was reserved for royal robes, and the emperor was often called the Son of Heaven because he was the only one allowed to wear it. In other parts of the world, though, yellow had a different vibe. It was often associated with caution or warning, like a traffic light today. However, a more intense yellow came from saffron, which was used in ancient Egypt and throughout the Mediterranean. Saffron represents courage and sacrifice. In ancient times, it was so valuable that it was used in religious ceremonies and clothing for the highest castes. And later on, in the Middle Ages, Indian yellow was introduced. A pigment created from the urine of cows fed a special diet of mango leaves. But let's talk about green, the color of life, nature, and renewal. In ancient Egypt, green was the color of fertility and resurrection. The Egyptians associated it with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. They used malachite, a green mineral, to create pigment for their tombs and art. But it was difficult to work with and didn't last long. They even used green malachite for makeup, but green wasn't always easy to come by. In ancient China, verdigris pigment from copper exposed to vinegar or wine was prized. It wasn't until the 18th century that viridian, a synthetic version, was developed, becoming a popular choice, especially during the Renaissance, after being created from a mix of chrome and iron, making green more accessible for painters and artists. Now let's look at black. One of the earliest sources of black pigment was carbon black. Early humans would create this by charring bone or wood. However, lamp black, created by collecting soot from burning oil lamps, became a common pigment in ancient times. Black is a color that has carried so many meanings throughout history. In ancient times, black was often seen as a symbol of death and the underworld, but the Egyptians also saw it as a color of rebirth because it represented the fertile soil along the Nile River. And in the world of art, black is essential. It's the color that creates contrast and highlights, making other colors pop. Without black, the full spectrum of colors would feel incomplete. And finally, let's talk about white, the color of purity and peace. But, historically, white was also a color of mourning in some cultures. In ancient China, white was worn for funerals, symbolizing death and the end of life. But across the world, white has also been associated with new beginnings, purity, and wedding gowns. In Western culture, it's a color of innocence, while in some parts of Asia, it's the color of loss. The earliest white pigment was chalk, ground into powder and used to brighten walls and clothes. But lead white, created by soaking lead plates in vinegar and fermenting them, became the go-to white pigment in Europe during the Renaissance. While it was prized for its bright, opaque nature, it was also dangerous. Lead poisoning was a real threat to artists and painters. Isn't it amazing how the same color can have such different meanings? Colors have shaped how we communicate, express ourselves, and even how we view the world. So next time you see a color, remember, it's not just a pigment. It's a part of a long, rich history that tells a story far beyond what meets the eye. If you enjoyed our video, please tune in to more amazing episodes of WonderWhy.